All right, so we are going to do chapters 11 and 12 now. In chapter 10, Barry was forced off of his roof and ended up in the floodwaters. He found a tree to cling to, and then a house came straight at him and hit the tree. He was able to grab the window frame and hold on to the window. And then he saw a piece of the wood fall into the floodwaters, and it was blue, or sky blue. And he was like, this can't be. And it ended up being at Abe McKay's house, the guy that used to be his friend and then ended up being kind of like a kid that scares him. And he heard the dog Cruz barking inside the home, the killer dog. So we'll see what happens now. Chapter 11. Barry's heart pounded. That dog was crazy. What if he came after Barry? Cruz barked some more. Barry had to get out of here. But then there was a noise. A whimpering howl. It rose above the wind, and it was the saddest sound Barry had ever heard. Sadder than Cleo's sobbing. Sadder than the song Dad had played at Gramps' funeral. Sadder than Barry's own sobs. That didn't sound like a killer dog. It sounded like a dog that was terrified. Cruz howled again, begging, pleading. "Help me, please," he seemed to be saying. "Help me, please." Barry knew what he had to do. He hoisted himself up, climbed through the window, and eased himself down on the other side. It was very dark, but Barry could see shadowy shapes around him. A couch floating in the corner, a smashed lamp, and a big cabinet lying face down in the water. Cruz barked brightly, like he could tell help was on the way. "Cruz!" Barry shouted. The dog barked again. "I'm coming!" Barry called. Barry waited carefully. His shoes were still floating around in his living room at home. His socks had been ripped off in his ride through the flood. Already his feet were sliced up, and he knew there had to be glass and nails everywhere. Cruz was whimpering loudly now. "Don't worry," Barry called. Cruz barked like he understood. Barry made it to the stairway, which rose out of the water. The house was tilted to the side and rocked gently in the waves. Barry had to hold on tightly to the banister. Cruz was waiting for him in the doorway of Abe's room. His leash was attached to Abe's bed, which Cruz had managed to drag across the room. He was straining so hard to get free that it was practically strangling himself. Barry paused for a second, thinking of all the scary stories Abe had told him about Cruz. But then he closed his eyes and swallowed hard. He walked up, reached for Cruz's collar, and unhooked it from the leash. Cruz leaped up, and for a split second Barry thought he had made a terrible mistake. But then Cruz licked Barry's chin. He licked Barry's hands and pushed his head against Barry's leg. Then he sat down and looked up into Barry's eyes. He gave 4 little barks. "Thank you," he seemed to cheer. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Barry bent down to Cruz and patted him on the head. "You're welcome," he said. Cruz gave Barry one last kiss on the nose and then looked at him expectantly. "What now?" he seemed to ask. "What should we do?" And that was when it hit Barry. He wasn't alone anymore. He and Cruz were together. So it looks like I was right back at the beginning, chapter 1 or chapter 2, when I said Cruz most likely wasn't a killer dog, and that when we thought that he had unleashed him off the chain, that he wasn't going to do anything mean. But back then he hadn't actually unleashed him, so we didn't know for sure. But as always, dogs are usually sweet. Not always, I know, but they have the potential to be. So we're on chapter 12 now. That was the end of chapter 11. So chapter 11 shows us that Barry finally is no longer alone. He has a dog. He rescued Abe's dog, and now Cruz is with him. So he's probably a little less scared because at least he has something that's alive that can comfort him. So chapter 12. The back wall of Abe's room was gone, but there was a spot near the top of the stairs where they could escape from the wind and the rain. Barry and Cruz sat there for a few minutes, until Cruz started to whimper. "What's wrong?" Barry asked. The dog was panting. "You thirsty? You need water?" Cruz's tail thumped. Barry knew that none of the sinks would work, but maybe there were bottles of water somewhere in the kitchen. Barry and Cruz made their way down the slanting staircase. "You stay here," Barry said to Cruz, pointing to the bottom of the stairs. He didn't want Cruz wading through the dirty water. But Cruz wouldn't stay. He seemed to be glued to Barry's leg. They waded into the small kitchen. Dishes were floating around their feet, along with boxes and cans of food, but nothing to drink. Barry yanked open the fridge, and a thrill went through him when he saw 2 6-packs of Coke, some cheese, hot dogs, bread, and a large bottle of water. "We're in luck," he said to Cruz. He looked around for something to carry the food in. He saw a plastic bag floating in the corner and bent down to reach for it. But before he could grab it, Cruz let out a ferocious bark and rammed his body against Barry, almost knocking him down. A long, dark shape shot out from under the bag and disappeared into the murky water. A snake. Barry stood still, frozen in fear. Was that a water moccasin? He remembered Gramps' most terrifying Betsy story about one of his friends who had been bitten by a water moccasin while making his way through the flooded streets. The water was filled with poisonous snakes, Gramps had said. Lots of people got bit. Now Barry shuddered. He grabbed as much food and soda and water as he could carry. He hurried back upstairs, praying that snakes couldn't climb. Yeah, they can. There was a metal bowl in Abe's room, and Barry filled it to the top. Cruz emptied it, and Barry filled it up again. Barry drank 2 cans of Coke. He ripped open the package of hot dogs. Cruz ate 4, one after another. Barry made himself a cheese sandwich and gave Cruz the crust. When they were finished, they settled back against the wall. Cruz lay down on top of Barry's legs. He looked up at Barry with a thank you kind of look on his face. Barry stroked his head. "You're not really a killer dog, are you?" Barry said. Cruz looked at him and panted a little. "Nah, that dog was probably from the shelter in downtown New Orleans. Abe couldn't afford a fancy Chinese army dog, even if he had wanted one. He had made up that killer dog routine. Another trick to scare the bejesus out of Barry and Jay." "The storm will be over soon," Barry said to Cruz. The wind seemed to be dying down a bit. Cruz was still looking up at him. Barry saw the fear and confusion in his eyes. What could Barry do? And then it came to him. "I found my thrill," Barry sang quietly, "on Blueberry Hill." Cruz licked Barry's chin. He liked it. So Barry kept singing, "The moon stood still on Blueberry Hill," until Cruz put his head on Barry's knee and closed his eyes. Soon Barry's eyelids started to sag. He stopped singing and leaned back to take a rest, lulled by the gentle rocking of the house and by the song, familiar now, of Katrina's winds and rain. And that is the end of chapter 12. So in chapter 12, he's still with Cruz. They have found some food and water and drinks. There was a snake in the water, and Cruz, the killer dog, knocked Barry over because he was trying to save him from the snake. So Cruz is definitely not a killer dog, and he protected Barry, just as Barry is protecting Cruz. Right now, they're kind of calm. He's singing the song that his dad sings to himself to calm himself down. So Barry's taking something that he learned from his father and calming himself down and calming down Cruz. So it's kind of like how his father used to calm him down with a song. Now he's calming down his own little life that he has in his hands right now. All right, and that is where we're at. So they're still in scary times, but, hopefully the book's called I Survived, so we know they're going to survive. So that's the good part. All right, y'all have a good day.